The next few days I was a case of nerves. I jumped out of my skin if somebody so much as dropped a nickel on the floor. At the dinner table, I poked at my food and stared into space like I was in a trance. Sometimes the picture of my mother with the roached legs would leap into my head, and I would have to swallow a spoonful of honey for my stomach. I was so antsy I couldn't sit through 5 minutes of American Bandstand on television, when ordinarily I was glued to Dick Clark's every word. I walked around and around the house, pausing here and there to picture my mother in various rooms, sitting with her skirt spread over the piano bench, kneeling beside Our Lady, studying the recipe collection that May clipped from magazines and kept taped on the refrigerator. I would stare at these visions with my eyes glazed over, only to look up and see August or June or Rosaline watching me. They clucked their tongues and felt my face for fever. They'd say, "What's wrong? What's gotten into you?" I shook my head. "Nothing," I lied. "Nothing." In truth, I felt as if my life was stranded out on the high dive, about to leap into an unknown water, dangerous waters. I only wanted to postpone the plunge a while, to feel my mother's closeness in the house, to pretend I wasn't afraid of the story that had brought her here, or that she might go and surprise me the way she had in the dream, turning up six-legged and ugly. I wanted to march up to August and ask why my mother had been here, but fear stopped me. I wanted to know, and I didn't want to know. It was all hung up in limbo. Late Friday afternoon, we had finished cleaning the last of the suppers and storing them away. Zach went to take a look under the hood of the honey wagon. It was still acting funny and overheating in spite of Neil having worked on it. I wandered back into my room and sat on my cot. Heat radiated from the window. I considered getting up to turn the fan on, but only sat there staring through the panes at a milky blue sky and a sad, ragged feeling catching hold inside. I could hear music coming from the truck radio, Sam Cooke singing Another Saturday Night. Then May calling across the yard to Rosaline, something about getting the sheets off the clothesline. And I was struck all at once how life was out there going on through this regular course, and I was suspended, waiting, caught in a terrible crevice between living my life and not living it. I couldn't go on biding time like there was no end of it, no end to this summer. I felt tears spring up. I would have to come clean. Whatever happened, well, it would just happen. I went over to the sink and washed my face. Taking a deep breath, I stuffed my mother's Black Mary picture and her photograph into my pocket and started towards the pink house to find August. I thought we would sit on one end of her bed or out in the lawn chair if the mosquitoes weren't bad. I imagined August would say, "What's on your mind, Lily? Are we finally going to have our talk?" I would pull out the wooden picture and tell her every last thing, and then she would explain about my mother. If only that had happened instead of what did. As I strode towards the house, Zach called me from the truck. "Want to ride into town with me? I've got to get a new radiator hose before the store closes." "I'm going to talk to August," I said. He slammed down the hood and smeared his hands front and back on his pants. "August is with Sugar Girl in the parlor. She showed up crying, something about Otis using her life savings to buy a second-hand fishing boat. But I've got something really important to talk to her about." "You'll have to get in line," he said. "Come on, we'll get back before Sugar Girl leaves." I hesitated, then gave in. "All right." The auto parts store sat two doors down from the movie theater. As Zach pulled into the parking space in front, I saw them, 5 or 6 white men standing by the ticket booth. They milled around, casting quick glances up and down the sidewalk, like they were waiting for someone. All of them so nicely dressed, wearing ties with claps on them, like store clerks and bank tellers. The old man held out what looked like a handle from a shovel. Zach turned off the honey wagon and stared at them through the windshield. A dog, an old beagle with an aged white face, wandered out of the auto parts store and began to sniff at something on the sidewalk. Zach drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and sighed, and I suddenly realized it was Friday, and they were out here waiting for Jack Palance and the colored woman. We sat there a minute, not speaking, the sounds in the truck magnified. The squeak in a spring under the seat, the tapping of Zach's fingers, the sharp way I was breathing. Then one of the men yelled, causing me to jump and bang my knee against the glove compartment. He gazed across the street and shouted, "What are you staring at over there?" Zach and I both turned and looked through the back window. 3 teenage boys stood on the sidewalk drinking RC colas out of a bottle and glaring over at the men. Let's come back another time, I said. It'll be okay, Zach said. You wait here. No, it won't be okay, I thought. As he slid out of the honey wagon, I heard the boys call Zach's name. They crossed the street and came over to the honey wagon. Glancing through the window at me, they gave Zach a few playful shoves. One of them waved his hand in front of his face, like he'd bitten into a Mexican pepper. Who you got there? He said. I looked at them, tried to smile, but my mind was on the men, who I could see were watching us. The boys saw it too, and one of them, who I would later find out was named Jackson, said real loud, You gotta be dumb as dirt to believe Jack Palance is coming to Tiburon. And all of them laughed, even Zach. The man holding the shovel handle walked right up to the truck bumper and stared at the boys with the same half smile, half sneer I had seen on T-Ray's face 1,000 times. The sort of look conjured from power without benefit of love, and he yelled, What did you say, boy? The murmuring noise on the street fell away. The beagle dropped his ears and slunk off under a parked car. I saw Jackson bite down, causing a tiny ripple across his jaw. I saw him raise his RC cola bottle over his head and throw it. I closed my eyes as it flew out of his hand. When I opened them again, there was glass sprayed across the sidewalk. The man with the shovel handle dropped it and had his hand over his nose, blood sweeping through his fingers. He turned back to the other men. That nigger busted open my nose, he said, sounding more surprised than anything. He looked around, confused for a moment, then headed into nearby stores, dripping blood all the way. Zach and the boys stood by the truck door in a little knot, stuck to the pavement, while the rest of the men walked over and formed a half circle around them, hemming them in against the truck. Which one of you threw the bottle? One man said. The boys didn't open their mouths. Bunch of cowards, another man said. This one had picked up the shovel handle from the sidewalk and was jabbing it in the air at the boys' direction every time they moved. Just tell us which one of you it was, and you other three can go, he said. Nothing. People had started coming out of the stores, gathering in clumps. I stared at the back of Zach's head. I felt like my heart had a little ledge on it, and I was standing there leaning as far out as I could, waiting to see what Zach would do. I knew that being a snitch was considered the lowest sort of person, but I wanted him to point his finger and say, The one over there, he did it. That way he could climb back into the honey truck and we would be on our way. Come on, Zach. He turned his head and looked at me from the corner of his eye. Then he shrugged his shoulders slightly, and I knew it was over and done. He would never open his mouth. He was trying to say to me, I'm sorry, but these are my friends. He chose to stand there and be one of them.